you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Art of Political Discourse. Let's get right to it. Pakistan and Afghanistan are both claiming to be in an all-out war. This would come as a shock to many because not recently the United States President Donald Trump professed to have ended any hostilities between the two countries. Let's get into a little back history of Afghanistan, for instance. Afghanistan, as you all know, or it should be known, the United States and Afghanistan was in a war some 25 years ago when it started. I think that was 2001 to be more exact. Anyway, the U.S. had led an invasion of Afghanistan in October of 2001. It was launched as Operation Enduring Freedom. It was a direct response to the September 11th, 2001 so-called terrorist attack. The war began when the Taliban regime refused to hand over Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, the group said to be responsible for the 9/11 attacks, who was based in Afghanistan. The initial objectives, the United States had aimed to destroy Al-Qaeda training camps, capture Osama bin Laden, and overthrow the Taliban government that sheltered them. The military action that ensued, the war started with airstrikes, followed by a ground campaign partnering with the Afghan Northern Alliance to oust the Taliban. It wasn't supposed to be, well, I guess it could be said that it was a long-term strategy and shift, but the focus shifted from a counterterrorism mission to a nation-building effort to establish a democratic government. Here it is again, the United States, one of their policies, they profess to not be about this, but they are always in the business of regime change or overthrowing certain governments who do not see eye to eye in terms of what the United States government's agenda is or what they say their natural interests are. That being said, the challenges in terms of the war became the longest in U.S. history, marked by failure to establish stable government, widespread corruption, and a resilient Taliban insurgency. Okay. The conclusion, after 20 years, the conflict concluded in August 2021 with the U.S. withdrawal and the rapid return of the Taliban to power. Now, here we are, and we're dealing with the Pakistan and Afghanistan declaration of war. As far as we know, well, we would like to know what is the issue between Pakistan and Afghanistan, what is causing this war. We know that Donald Trump had professed to have quashed or squashed any issues relating to Pakistan and Afghanistan being in conflict. But as we know, especially today, and this is why this is being brought to you in terms of content, the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan has deteriorated into what Pakistan officials have described as open war, and it's characterized by significant cross-border airstrikes and artillery battles. Let's keep in mind, or let's put into perspective, that Pakistan is a nuclear power. They do have a nuclear arsenal. Afghanistan does not. Afghanistan is bigger in size and area. However, Pakistan does boast a nuclear arsenal. That being said, the core issue in terms of what's going on between the two is a militant sanctuaries, or let's call it the TTP, is what they're calling the TTP. The problem being that is Pakistan accuses the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan of providing a safe haven to the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, also known as the Pakistani Taliban. The conflict between Pakistan and the TTP has intensified its attacks inside Pakistan, including a surge in suicide bombings, targeting security forces and civilians. The stance, Islamabad demands that Kabul turn over TTP leaders or neutralize their ability to attack from across the border. The Afghan Taliban, however, generally denies these accusations and resists acting against the TTP, with whom they share ideological and historical ties. Now, that being said, we are confronted with the situation where Pakistan and Afghanistan are both declaring that there is an open war occurring between the two. As far as any statements from the United States on this issue, they are forthcoming. We have in our possession a clip we'd like to share with the people. This clip will speak to this ongoing or this escalating conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Before we show this clip, I'd like to ask that you please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to this channel, The Art of Political Discourse. Your participation and viewership with this channel will be greatly appreciated, in such that we can continue to bring you informative and educational content for the masses. So let's deal with this, please. And this clip is provided by Face the Nation.
Pakistan has declared an open war with Afghanistan following months of conflict. The neighboring nations have been conducting tit-for-tat strikes since October. The fighting has so far killed more than 70 people. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb has the details.
Well, just of yet, that's not a full-scale war. Only 70 people have been deceased or ended as a result of this conflict. So Kabul and Islamabad, Pakistan, Islamabad, and Afghanistan's Kabul, they haven't really in any stretch of the imagination enacted all-out war between one another. You know, there are no missiles flying, planes flying. I mean, consistent warfare between the two. 70 pronounced deceased at this stage is still, I think, in the first stages or the beginnings of a conflict. But I wouldn't label that an all-out war or an all-out conflict of war.
Well, what we're seeing now is a major escalation between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
An escalation would be more appropriate in terms of, you know, describing what's going on. An escalation.
It's Taliban-led government in what Pakistan's defense minister is calling a, quote, open war. Now, as we've been reporting, Pakistan launched overnight airstrikes across Afghanistan, including the capital Kabul and in Kandahar as well. Now, this is the heart of the Taliban's power. Now, the Taliban have said that they've responded by targeting Pakistani military positions, with both sides claiming heavy casualties and also battlefield gains. We've seen those images from hospitals showing the wounded, but frankly, the true number remains impossible to independently verify. Now, what makes this especially dangerous is that Pakistan now appears to be directly targeting sites tied to the Taliban government itself, and not just alleged hideouts of what's known as the Pakistani Taliban or Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, also known as the TTP. Now, Islamabad has long accused the Taliban of sheltering the TTP, which Pakistan says launches attacks from Afghan soil against Pakistani forces. Now, this marks a clear shift from a shadow conflict to direct confrontation. On the diplomatic front, there is a scramble to contain this. Iran has offered to help facilitate dialogue. China has publicly called for de-escalation. And there are also reports of Turkey and Saudi Arabia engaging behind the scenes after earlier mediation efforts, including a ceasefire brokered with Turkey and Qatar back in October, failed to hold. Now, for the Trump administration, the stakes here are high. A widening conflict risks opening space for militant groups, destabilizing a nuclear from Pakistan, and complicating U.S. calculations at a moment when Washington is already weighing how to deal with Iran, which of course borders both Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Well, looking at the map there, it seems that in terms of geography, both of them countries are kind of equal. But what's more, what stands out more is the fact that The United States has not, well, President Trump, to be more specifically, because he is the one who said that he ended any conflict between the two. Obviously, that was a he misspoke, because we see what's occurring and what the escalation of these exchanges between the two militarily can lead to. Now, couple that with the fact that they said, yes, that Pakistan or Afghanistan, excuse me, is right next door to Iran. So then you would have to think, or one would think that if something really broke out, Afghanistan would more than likely be on the side with Iran. This is something to look forward to. This is something to actually start trying to weigh the outcome of not just the conflict, but the outcome in terms of who will begin to become involved in this conflict, and will this conflict escalate or spill over to other nations?
I've been covering both of these countries for nearly 2 decades, and I have never seen this relationship reach this point. The risks for both countries are enormous, and a prolonged conflict that destabilizes this region once again would have serious global repercussions. The bottom line is this: this is no longer a routine border clash, and when airstrikes are hitting a capital and both sides are speaking in the language of war, miscalculation becomes the greatest danger, and right now, that risk is extremely high.
I'd like to add, though, to what he was saying. When there are conflicts such as this, where neighbors actually clash or go at one another, chances are that something or some unseen party, some shadow power, had something to do to escalate this situation. Now, I understand that Pakistan is claiming that the TTP is the reason for this escalation. That very well may be true. However, who are the TTP? Who are among their ranks? And I say that to say, nowadays there are all kinds of plants, individuals who are sent from other locations, other power brokers from other regions to go and infiltrate into these organizations. And these organizations are easily misled to do certain things, or commit certain acts that are against what the norm is. Point an example, Boko Haram in the Sahel, actually they're in Nigeria, but other terrorist groups in the Sahel, come to find out, these so-called terrorist groups are backed by other foreign powers. So my point is this: who is backing the TTP to create a situation where we see this escalation between two neighboring countries that could very well get out of hand? This is what people need to start looking at when we're talking about geopolitics, when we're talking about the destabilization of certain countries as opposed to others, and how you can, as the saying goes, two birds with one stone. It's something to be considered for sure. And being that Afghanistan is right next door to Iran, it should give those of us who like to think in terms of what politics really are and how they play a role in the destabilization as well as the improvement of certain countries is played. So just give that some thought. Let's get back to this.
Back to you.
MTS Tayeb, thank you. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins me now. Sam is also a former assistant secretary for counterterrorism at the Homeland Security Department. Sam, thanks so much.
And come to find out about this thing called terrorism, most Western powers, those who are in power, create these so-called terrorist groups or cells. They fund them, they supply them, and they send them on the missions that they go on. Most of these terrorist groups exist to only do one thing and one thing only, and that is to destabilize already democracies or governments that are in place. Why does this occur? Why is the destabilizations of certain countries necessary? Let it be told, some have to do with religious differences, ideologies, economics, or again, a lot of what takes place is not readily understood or known. However, keep in mind that a lot of these so-called terrorist groups have funding and backing from Western powers. So then, therefore, it remains, or it stands to reason that a lot of this that is going on, that we see happening around the world with certain countries, is being orchestrated by outside forces. And if that's the case, then there is a certain goal. There's an objective, all right, an ulterior motive for why this is happening. And one is not just to destabilize that nation or country. It's probably to also overthrow the government in that country, so that those who are orchestrating this conflict, or these conflicts, can come in and say, hey, you need our help, we're in here now. And before you know it, they have a foothold in these countries that in most cases have kicked out these foreign powers. Something to think about.
So much for being with us. It's really sobering to hear Imtiaz's report there, and the tensions, the level that the tensions are at right now. Are there any broader security concerns that the United States might be worried about when it comes to this conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Well, certainly, as our colleague Imtiaz pointed out, anytime you have a nuclear-armed country engaged in a conflict, there are real concerns about what kind of capabilities that country may be willing to use to accomplish its objectives. In the immediate term, when it comes to risks to Americans and U.S. national security, I am deeply concerned about the risks of militants and terrorists on both sides of this conflict and around the world becoming directed or inspired to engage in violence as a result of what started as cross-border skirmishes and have now expanded into direct attacks on cities. There are sectarian aspects to this conflict, there are militants involved, and there are terrorist groups on both sides of the border that could feel energized and required to engage in violence in light of what's happening.
Well, let's turn to Iran. Where do talks stand now? And how likely at this point is it that we'll see some kind of military confrontation?
Again, Iran plays a role in this. To what extent it's anyone's guess, or anyone can guess or surmise what that role is, or why this is happening right next door to Iran. But believe and know that it's not for nothing. Their politics, again, is a cold game. And it's played in such a way to where those who actually know how to manipulate politics or construct the blueprint or how politics should be ran, especially in the shadows, they have certain tactics. I think that there's a possibility that this tactic, or this or the way that we're seeing this conflict unfolding, could possibly be through direct involvement from shadow governments or shadow groups inside governments to destabilize certain regions for a reason. Do not think for a minute that the Israel government or the United States are not happy about what is transpiring between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Again, Afghanistan held out for over 20 years in a war with the United States. United States tucked tail and left with only just the personnel and not the equipment. So you had, hundreds of billions of dollars of equipment left behind. Couple that with the fact that the Taliban, Afghanistan wants nothing to do with the United States or the Israel government. So Pakistan is a little more compliant towards the United States, for sure. In terms of the Israeli government, you can't say. But Pakistan does toe the queue when it comes to United States making demands upon it. So there, again, we don't know what's really spurring this conflict on, and what's the real purpose, what's behind what's going on between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Well, when it comes to where diplomacy stands, the short answer is it depends who you ask. According to President Trump, he is disappointed and not pleased with the status of negotiations. No further information on that, but he expressed that displeasure on Friday. At the same time,
she looks really dull. Like she's out of it.
In an interview with our colleague Margaret Brennan, the Omani foreign minister who is mediating negotiations between the U.S. and Iran indicated that talks are progressing quite well and that, in fact, the Iranian regime is willing to give up its nuclear enrichment capabilities. It would really be the first time in history that they've been willing to do that. So the Omanis are indicating a much rosier picture regarding the state of negotiations than President Trump himself. In terms of what, are we closer to a military strike? It sure feels that way in light of the U.S. and other governments encouraging their citizens to leave the region, and the U.S. and other governments drawing down certain diplomats in the region, which typically means that there are real concerns and analysis that war or more violence is imminent.
Sam.
Okay.
Earlier today, President Trump said this of Cuba, that, quote, we could very well end up having a friendly takeover. What's your reaction to that statement?
My reaction is we may be seeing a new model of intervention under the Monroe Doctrine, or the Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere under President Trump, in which President Trump and his administration unseat the leadership, the president of Cuba, but like they did with Maduro, but keep other parts of the government in place to avoid some kind of chaotic fallout. That may be what President Trump is referring to, but when it comes to plans for the Western Hemisphere, we are just waiting to see.
Okay, now that went from Afghanistan and Pakistan's issue to Iran all the way back to the Western Hemisphere in Cuba and the United States, or the United States bullying of the Western Hemisphere and the Caribbean island nations. Again, back to Pakistan and Afghanistan, this is an issue that most are looking at closely because there seems to be a connection between the two. The fact that these two just up and out of nowhere after President Trump said he had quashed or squashed any issues or discrepancies, conflicts between the two, all of a sudden it's boom, it's reignited. So take that with a grain of salt. We don't know the real workings behind what is going on in Pakistan and or Afghanistan, but one thing is for sure, it's in the same region where the United States and the Israeli government wants to dismantle, destabilize, and change the government of Iran. So let's see what happens as a result of what's happening in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And if those guys have any sense, they would stop immediately what they're doing, because in time, they very well may need one another against powers that be. Okay, that being said, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to The Art of Political Discourse. Your viewership and participation with this channel enables us to continue to bring to you informative as well as educational content for the masses. Take care of yourself and each other.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution.